This is an unscheduled video, but I wanted to just take some time to share a few recent thoughts with you. So, over the past couple of weeks, I have come to realize how doing the inner work is often talked about as a really empowering, freeing thing. And it is. Um, it is. But no one really warns you about the grief that comes with it. Because when you start changing internally, your relationships don't always come with you. And most times you don't lose people in a dramatic way. You just slowly realize over time that things don't fit anymore. So if you're in a season where you feel like you're outgrowing certain spaces or connections, this video is definitely for you. So when you start rebuilding your inner world, your values, boundaries, and strengthen your sense of self, your outer world kind of has to change to reflect that, to respond to that. And that's, in my experience, where the friction starts, because the life you built is often built around an older, outdated version of you. Growth doesn't always break a relationship. Sometimes it reveals ones which were only working because you were smaller and quieter. And I also have experienced a situation where growth has transformed a relationship for the better. But I find that that only really happens when everybody involved is committed to growing with each other. So for me, the shift happened when I sat down to figure out what my values are. Once I did, I would find myself in certain situations saying to myself, oh, like this doesn't align with my values and this doesn't feel like who I am. For example, self expression is a core value of mine. And being in environments where I'm unable to freely express myself, ones where I feel like I have to censor myself, is incredibly limiting for me. But I'm at a point now where I can name exactly why I feel uncomfortable in a situation. Like, I can say I feel so restricted here and I don't feel safe to say what I really think. And I find that once you've gained that level of self awareness, it's really hard to going back to that previous version of yourself. And then it's like, I cannot keep putting myself in these situations when I know they're detrimental to my mental health. I'm also like a recovering people pleaser. And one of the hardest things to accept was that a lot of my relationships were only held together because of my willingness to stretch my own boundaries to accommodate others, just to preserve the relationship. And because of that, I wasn't communicating well at all. Not because I didn't care to, but because I wanted to prioritize harmony over honesty. And I also found that in the long run, there wasn't much harmony in the relationship anyway, because it led to me feeling resentment rather than feeling happy in the relationship. And so that's not harmony. And I'm not a perfect communicator now, but that's one of the things over the past few years that I've worked really hard on improving, because I understand the importance of it and the importance of healthy communication and clear communication within any relationship that you have. And something I've learned is, if you are dismissed after clearly communicating, then that's not necessarily a reflection of you. Sometimes that's just information. So I've been in therapy for, this is my fourth year now. Fourth year? Yes, my fourth year. And it has been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life, without a doubt. But it's also an experience that has been full of grief. And it's such a paradoxical thing in the sense that you gain clarity and self trust, but it widens the gap between you and people who haven't done or can't do the shadow work. And the grief is a side effect of the growth you experience. When you start aligning yourself to your core values, you start to reevaluate all of your relationships, past and present. And in my relationships, some of my relationships, there has been a lot of unspoken agreements like, we don't question this, or what I say goes. And this clashes with my need for self expression. And the answer to that might just be to say, then just say what you want to say. You know, if it clashes with your idea of self expression, just open your mouth and talk. But when you are in environments where people aren't open to receiving what you have to say, it's not a mutual conversation. It's not one of mutual acknowledgement and agreement. It becomes a situation where you're just constantly fighting to be heard and understood. And earlier in my journey, I would fight back because I thought that's what I needed to do. You know, if you need to talk, then stop talking. But I would often find myself feeling no better about myself or the situation I was in. And why not? I fought, I said what I needed to say, but instead of feeling understood, I would just feel drained. And I don't think that's a sustainable dynamic. And I found that when someone is committed to misunderstanding you, there is very little that you can do to convince them of yourself, of your worth. And I experienced that recently, where I thought that by just explaining myself more clearly and offer more understanding, then the other person would see my side. And they did not. And I left the exchange feeling like I'd sacrificed a little bit of myself in the attempt. And it took that to realize that the kindest thing that I could do to myself in that moment was to just disengage and walk away. I feel like I have been in a really long transitional season. Old and current relationships are either feeling thin or misaligned, and not all of them, but the majority of them. New connections have yet to be established, and I'm still on a journey to find people who share similar values to me and can speak the same emotional and existential language, I guess. And there is definitely a sense of loneliness I feel at times because I feel like I can't just unknow what I now know. There's this feeling of like, I can't go back now. I can't go back to these relationships. I can't go back to these situations. And that's the in between. It's tough. It can be really tough at times, but I know it's temporary. And I have to be optimistic because the alternative is what? To convince myself that this is it. I refuse to believe that. So right now I'm figuring out how to maintain light touch connections without self-betrayal. And I want to find or cultivate spaces where I don't feel like the odd one out. And I'm learning how to work with the grief so that it doesn't completely consume me. Because it's not necessary that doing the work makes you lose people. It shows you who is able to meet you where you are. And that can definitely be a painful process, but it's an honest one. I don't think that this season or the grief that you can potentially feel when you go through this period gets talked about enough. And if you've experienced this kind of grief after growth, I would love to hear how you made sense of it or where you are in that process. So thanks for being here. I'll see you next time.